Okay. There we go. We should be, we go to the watch page. Just check it. Yeah. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Thanks for giving me a second there. So, we we spoke a little bit briefly the other night, just getting set up for this. We talked about some things, but we didn't actually talk about MGTOW, right? You were, I mean, we kind of started, but you were going to explain it to me as I expressed to you that there was not really any experience on my side for this.
Right.
So, how long have you been looking into this, or first heard about it, and it made sense to you?
I first heard about it probably like 2.5 years ago. I was listening to a business coach. I
Mm-hmm.
guess you call him like a business coach, men's coach kind of thing, Glendon Cameron. And in one of his courses, he was talking about how there was a movement called Men Going Their Own Way, or if you want to call it a movement or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first I heard of it, but I didn't really look much into it at that point. Um, but I slowly started kind of slipping across videos here and there that were there would have been back then. It would have been MGTOW 101 would have been the channel. They were kind of like comedy videos where they'd show like clips of like women in the media and stuff like that, and it would be they were pretty funny videos. And anybody that's ever seen them, I think the channel now is called Men 101 or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
because he actually got shut down.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, it was considered it was a critique of female nature, and we're not allowed to critique women in this society. So it was considered. I think it was considered hate speech or something. Probably.
Mm,
Somebody got offended.
gotcha.
So yeah, probably we're at August now. We're coming up close to 2 years since I really started digging into MGTOW. I think I was dating that girl that I told you about,
Mm-hmm.
and it was as it started going down. I kind of I don't know. I'd seen a few videos, and I don't even got real deep arguing with the people, but I kind of commented on some of the videos saying, okay, well, it still sounds like a bunch of guys making a bunch of excuses, and instead of just being better, like stop making excuses and blaming women for how they are or whatever for
Well,
their
yeah,
nature.
that's exactly how I feel. That's
Right.
where I'm at. I think about personal responsibility and how that plays into it and making bad choices. There's bad women, there's bad guys out there, and making a choice to be better, like you were saying, to, as I've always said, be the man that attracts the type of woman you want. Um, if I do that, then I level up, and then I'm looking for a female that's leveled up. But it seems
Mm.
that the consensus across from just the brief uh, introduction to MGTOW that I've had or MGTOW is that it doesn't matter. Women are women are women, and you're kind of screwed either way. So
Yeah.
am I
So
off or?
well, so yeah, MGTOW. There's a goes really deep into critiquing female nature. One of the other things I got really into around that time was a channel by Karen Strawn. Girl Writes What was the name of it, which was a critique of feminism. And I kind of knew in a general way about feminism,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know a lot. Uh, Not nearly. I just the, the rah women's rights, whatever, which I thought was pretty silly anyway. Uh, but then when I
Why
started
would you
watching,
think that's silly?
well, because okay, so I come from a family of coal miners,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so like even in like the '90s, right, it was still far more traditional than probably the rest. I would say the rest of the country, but much of the country. Like when I moved to New York, it was culture shock and
Mm-hmm.
how different that it was here. So down there, I still I think I told you I had two sets of great grandparents that were still alive. All my grandparents to this to this day, all my grandparents are still alive.
Wow.
It was considered fairly normal for somebody to have a child when they're like 16, 17 years old, but that was just natural.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was so the kind of upbringing I got was like probably what most people would have seen like 100 years ago, at least kind of in a way. In the as far as the family dynamics were concerned, um, a lot of like marriage is for life. Once you're married, there is no such thing as divorce.
Okay.
Um,
So you're
we
saying you
had
just were raised in that type of environment, and so women were just at a certain. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to clarify, but you said it was a thing of women's rights and women rah, and it sounds like you're saying you're that was new to you.
No, well, not that it was new to me, just that it was a bunch of nonsense.
Or
Really.
okay.
Um,
So it's nonsense. Why I'm trying to define where you're at, like where your head is at around women. And so when you say that, it can go either way because it can be the extreme of feminism, which I can definitely have a conversation with you about, or it's women in general should or shouldn't have rights, or certain rights, I should say.
well, I think there's a lot to unpack there of just what rights do women not have anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole idea that women were oppressed in traditional society, which is not really all that accurate. But traditional society, those people were a lot more put together. First of all, their lives were a lot shorter,
Mm-hmm.
but um, they valued religion and they valued more spiritual things, and a lot of what religion and spiritual things really boil down to, and living a life that's more put together and having discipline is really a lot of times a lot more about what you don't do than it is about what you do. And a lot of people see it as they were trying to repress people's sexuality. I don't think that's so much the case as they were striving to raise people into full-grown adults rather quickly.
Well, I think all the way around it was repressed. Men, women, kids, right? You name it. I think it was definitely a much more strict environment for all people. It was equally oppressive in certain ways. Does that make sense?
I say strict, but the strict was because of holding a standard.
Right.
And so in that time period, you really could not afford to fuck things up.
Right.
Because that didn't just mean you were bringing you down, you were bringing your whole family down with you.
Right. Well, yeah, I agree. Look, I mean, it's not black and white. I don't think a lot is black and white in this world. I think some things are, and they get convoluted into not being. And then I think there's a lot of stuff that people just try to pick sides on, and there's a whole middle level discussion that needs to be had or entertained or thought about or unpacked so that there can be a better understanding as to what that really means for you, what it really means for somebody else. That's a little bit of why I'm asking right now is, so, I mean, let's just clear the board quickly then. So, I mean, you think women should have the right to vote? Is that, I mean,
Not really. I think the only people who should have the right to vote are people who own property. 1 vote per household.
So, yeah, back to a landowner type thing.
Yeah.
So how do you justify that?
People who are invested. They're invested. They have skin in the game.
Yeah. So why do you think it was changed to more, or to allow everybody to vote? Because it went from just landlords being able to vote to, all men and then eventually women. Mm-hmm. So what do you think the thinking was for allowing that to expand?
I know there was a lot of push. There was a lot of protesting and marching and pushing for it. But I mean, honestly, my opinion would just be that as America and the world has become more and more rich, people have become more entitled. People have become I honestly think people have become intellectually lazy. Like they don't actually want to learn and actually understand things. But it
I'd
probably
agree. There's some truth there. I think people in general, like around even sciences and stuff like that, are really incompetent when it comes to basics, right? And we're talking about basic ways of thinking that supersede your sex, your religion, anything, right? It's being able to process information in a way that is logical, right?
right.
So if you disagree or we disagree on something here, if we can talk about it logically, you can make a case, I can make a case, you can counter without everybody getting, all mad and hurt and up, and angry and can't have a conversation. I think
Right.
there's definitely that intellectual laziness lends itself to people just saying forget about it, right? Because as you say, we've become more prosperous, and we have people just like they don't have to deal with things. So if you go back to like your example of coal mining and that idea around all that, people, it was a harder way of life. People had to grow up. Lifespan presumably was a little shorter, right? People had to get on with their lives. There was a bigger impact if one person did or did not do something within the family unit that affected everybody. Nowadays, people can just kind of run amok and do whatever they want, and there's not necessarily an impact on others, but I believe actually there is an impact. There's an impact on the world.
There is an impact on others. That's one of the things that the modern way of living does not really seem to grasp anymore, which is that everything you would do, everything I do, whether I see the result of it or not, my actions affect other people.
Right.
Even my inaction affects other people too.
Right. Agreed.
In a number of ways, it's like a lot of times aren't even being seen. But nothing I do goes unpunished. There's consequence for everything that I do, whether I'm seeing it or not. In some way, my choices now will affect someone somewhere. Could be a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, and it could be somebody that I've never even seen. But my behavior impacts more than just me.
Yeah.
And so I think back then people were more aware of it. Men got the right. You think men were on the hook to fight wars and protect the culture, and so it kind of makes sense that they were given some sort of right to vote. Although I still think that the landowner thing is the superior way.
Yeah, but let me pause you for a second there, because you're saying men had to protect from other in the time of war, right? Well, I mean,
Right.
The argument's going to be made that war is caused by men, right?
That's fine for people to believe, but it's more complicated than that. If you're not willing to go to war, then you're willing to be invaded.
Right, but you're going to be invaded by other men, right? If we're just talking about men here and we're talking about the roles, I totally agree. You got to defend yourself, right? If we get invaded, I'm the first one grabbing my gun and going. Don't get me wrong. I'll protect my family. I'll protect your family. I'll protect this country. But, if we're just talking about the idea of men, are the first ones to go to war, they're the first ones to protect. I love Bill Burr. I don't know if you know who that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a great, comedy skit. And he talks about, why do we make more money, or 50 cents more an hour? It's because when the Titanic's going down, women and children are going first, right? And for some reason, we're left on the boat. And it's a comedy routine, and he makes some points, and it's quite funny. But I think there is a little bit of truth to that. But then we're also protecting usually from other men. Men are the perpetrators of a majority of violence in the world. That's a fact. That's not right or wrong. It doesn't make us better or worse than women. It's not even necessarily a comparison to women as a comparison to men, that the good men are going to stand up and defeat the bad guys, right?
Right. Well,
but women are also a weaker sex physically, and children are helpless, And again, this doesn't mean there's not bad women, there's not women murderers, there's not crazy women out there that you know, drown their kids. I mean, this is not talking about, you know, all or nothing, but there's definitely a bell curve of guys out there that are more violent and are going to cause more harm than women or kids, right? It's just a statistic.
So one of the things is saying that that same urge, that same violent nature of men, when it's integrated into a child, into a young man, ends up being the same thing that ends up building and growing prosperity within a nation. But also that even if men are the ones that cause the wars, women and children end up eating the fruits of all the spoils of the war. So we might not consciously like the idea of going to war, but nobody complains about reaping the benefits that come from it.
Hold on one second. A couple people are commenting. Okay, I'm just seeing. There's one guy on here. See if he had any questions. So
the spoils of war go to feed women and children,
and men.
Well, and men too, but then the men are just going to end up back off to war again.
Yeah, but that's our general nature, is to take care of, right? If you go back to the caveman days, right? You leave kind of the politics and everything out of it in what we understand today. You go back to, you know, we're in the cave, we're just, you know, hunter-gatherers, and we're 40,000 plus years ago, and we're on the plains, and we're in caves in France, and we're hunting. It's to go out and survive for all of us. There's a mutual benefit for, you know, having your offspring survive. So that includes taking care of the woman, taking care of the kids. You know, that's just a genetic thing built into our nature because we're built to procreate. At the end of the day, we can make all these, you know, this webcam that I can stream, and we can shoot across to the other side of the country and have people watch and everything. But at the end of the day, we're kind of put on this earth to have sex and procreate. That's like our number one job. And I think as men, or well, I think as men, because that's kind of what this channel is about, we're failing miserably on that. We're failing miserably as men to stand up and take our position in this world. And I mean in a good way, and I mean to take care of others. I have this kind of built into me that I want to provide for my family, that I want to, and I'm divorced, right? But I still feel like this need to take care of my girls. And even when they're with their mom, you know, she had a flat tire. I mean, hell, they went on vacation a couple of weeks ago. I drove them all to the airport, picked them up. My ex-wife was time to get a new car, so I went down to the dealership and helped her. Now, I understand not every relationship's like that because people just really don't get along. But the goal is to make the world a better place. So I think we gotta figure out why we're here. And I think the MGTOW, at least from what I'm understanding, I mean, you're going into a deeper place that is, you know, debatable. I mean, meaning we could sit here a long time and debate certain aspects. I think we'll agree on some, not agree on others.
Right.
But we're here and now. And what's the outcome that you're looking for? What is it that you want? Or
the immediate benefit of MGTOW in the short run is, I guess you'd say, safety. Is it safety? It's self-preservation. It's removing myself from a rigged game in the name of being able to get myself well. See, through MGTOW, I've received a lot of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, MGTOW. See, the problem with MGTOW is that it all depends on whose version of MGTOW you're listening to, because so much of MGTOW content is, if you listen to it, it sounds very angry.
Right.
So,
barely looked at some of that. That's one reason I wanted to talk to you about this and get your more broad, 2+ years of experience of looking at this. So this is really what I'd like to know. So you're saying, is it just all over the board? Are there a couple main just subsets of thinking? How does that work?
The main, the main, the main idea I would say of what MGTOW boils around at this point, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. The amount of liability that women bring to the table anymore, combined with how loose they've become, how unput together they are, how corrupted their mental state is, and then on top of it, that the media and the legal system seems to just sit and pour gas on that fire.
Mm-hmm.
For men, particularly young men, the juice is not worth the squeeze. And there's different people who have different takes. Some guys encourage it if you want to be involved with women. Short term, we suggest I say we, it's not really me. I don't. I suggest celibacy is what I recommend. But if you're going to be involved, we recommend short-term relationships and to not get yourself in a position where you have children and don't marry.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I think that that's what's honorable or noble. But the problem is that what's honorable and noble is not. It's not valued in our society anymore. We don't care about honor. Our legal system.
Well, let me stop you because two things. One, I agree with actually a lot of what you're saying. I think women have just kind of gone off the deep end, and there's the feminism issue. I'd like to talk about maybe in a moment. And but I wanted to read something. Let's see. It is from. And you got to explain this to me. Carly commented, said, simping for your ex doesn't make the world a better place. So what is simping? I'm apparently very ignorant here on these terms.
The word simping is the word simp is an acronym for someone investing in mediocre pussy.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not happening, though. There is definitely none of that going on. That's just human being to human being. And I think, Carly, it's funny how some of these have names that are female, like Janet is MGTOW. That's interesting. But
yeah, there are women who follow MGTOW. It's not.
Oh, so it can actually be female as well.
What's that?
So the female, male, it doesn't matter. And is female only a man
can be a MGTOW, but a lot of women, there are a lot of women who support and actually really like MGTOW.
Gotcha. Okay, understand. So she just wrote, you fixed her tire. Yeah. And my kids were in the car. And to be honest, if they weren't in the car and they were with me and she was broken down somewhere, I would go help. I would do that for a friend. I've had friends come help me. I've got, my best buddy, Jason, he's come and helped me, dropped everything at a moment's notice and come over and help me. I was in the middle of something, working on a house and it didn't go right. And he came over and he just helped me. We were actually re-copper piping the whole place and I needed his help and to get this job done.
Your ex-wife's not your friend though. I mean, maybe you see her as a friend, but in my eyes, right, an ex-wife, somebody who would rip my children, who would put my children's lives in the parental situation in disarray, is not my friend.
I was the one that. Okay. I wouldn't say that. It was very mutual, but I think I spearheaded it a little more. But it was mutual, and I understand our relationship is way more not the normal, right? Way more rare than most people. Most people can't even sit in the same room. We go to the parent-teacher conferences together. We do a lot of stuff. We share responsibilities. I took my daughter to the dentist. She took her to the dentist the next time. We trade off. So my experience on that is different. Now, we could fast forward to after I was divorced and a woman I dated, right? We talked a little bit about that, and that was insane. That was a lot of narcissism on her part, a lot of just, love bombing and going in through that whole cycle of abuse and screaming and yelling at me and losing it. She was a highly educated person too that worked for a Fortune 500 company. And, it was funny because she'd go out and help companies, then come back through the door and lose it on me. And would scream at me at restaurants. So I have absolutely experienced that other side. And I am extremely grateful for having gone through that, because in order to get through my thick head, what were my issues, I needed that sucker punch, if you will, that just experience that was just excruciatingly horrible to kick me in the ass, to get me thinking in a different way, to do research and to heal, right? You got healing, you said, through this group. I got healing through other groups. I got healing just through self-work and figuring things out. And there's, again, no right or wrong. I think whatever works ultimately is going to be the best. But delving in and going into that, I discovered myself. I discovered who I was, and I actually became a nicer person. And in my company, I'm working towards being a better leader. I think I'd mentioned before, I've got a coach to help me coach my team members and stuff like that. So as I just generally become a better person, as I generally learn how to treat myself better, I can therefore treat others better, right? Yeah. But if you're bittered from an experience with a woman, and then therefore see all women like that, or have had multiple relationships where it's been terrible, and you see, therefore, your lens is, well, all women must be like this, or there's maybe a spectrum, but they all kind of fall in the spectrum. I think that's bad thinking. I think there's a lot of great women out there, like there's a lot of great guys. But like you said, the media pours fuel, and you're gonna see the women that are always taking selfies and always into themselves. That, the Kardashians, those idiots, you're gonna see thrust into the limelight.
It runs deeper than that. Have you ever heard of Briefault's law?
No, say that again. What law?
Briefault's law.
No.
And or solipsism?
No.
Okay. And then you've already said narcissism. So Briefault's law and solipsism are two of what the third one was, narcissism. Characteristics, would you say characteristics, or they're like phenomenons that apply across the board to women. Briefault's law is essentially, I don't know it exactly, but basically the idea is in any animal kingdom, the female, including humans, the female only keeps a man around in her life when it benefits her and her children.
Okay.
And that
I'm familiar with that concept.
Where the benefits for her and her potential, even if she doesn't have offspring, her and her potential offspring, where those benefits end, her loyalty to you ends. Her involvement with you ends. When you no longer are useful to her agenda, you serve no purpose anymore. And so that's one. Solipsism is it's kind of almost like it's kind of like delusional or a deranged way of being that basically sees that the whole world only exists kind of like in relation to me, that the world revolves around me, basically.
It's like a narcissistic ideology.
Yeah. Well, narcissism is a lot of that's like entitlement, lying, because there's two forms. There's overt
and covert.
Narcissism.
Right. Yeah, I was with a covert.
Differently.
Yeah. The overt is more what we think of like a Tom Cruise or stars or people that are just all about themselves and don't look me directly in the eye, and I'm phenomenal, and you have people around you all day. I had a friend in the film industry here in L.A. God, I can't remember the name of the star, but he was telling me he was I could picture his face, but I can't remember him. He was telling me that he he was on set, and this guy's walking through, and he's got the shh crowd in front of him, right? Which is people literally are walking in front of him and surrounding him and going shh as he's walking by, like to just, no, you're not to make eye contact with him. You're not obviously to talk to him. None of this stuff. I mean, that's just that's crazy, overt kind of narcissistic behavior. The covert is more like, oh, you're great, you're awesome, and they use you and they discard you when they're done with you. So yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking about when you talk about there's no longer a need for somebody, but I think that I think in general we're going through an evolution as a society, because back to what you were saying, 100 years ago or less, it was like get married and you're married forever. It was we got to band together, we got to stick together through thick and thin because we got to survive, right? And I think today we don't have that. We don't need that as much, but we're also kind of feeling our oats and going through things in society with women's liberation, the pill, right? Men staying at home, women working. We're trying out all these different things, but ultimately, at the end of the day, people want to be, I believe anyways, people want to be bonded to somebody else. And a lot of people, I don't think, know how to do that. They don't know what it means to be trustworthy. They don't know what it means to have somebody else that's trustworthy. And I think that vanity that we see in society is going a long way to wrecking that. And that's why I think we're having the experiences we're having with people. Again, male or female.
Plenty of people do, and I say even women do want to be paired up. The issue, so another thing that MGTOW points out is that 80% of women aim to try to mate with 20% of the top men.
Yeah.
While 80% of men are left with the bottom 20% of women, and generally speaking, won't even mate with them. But there's the other part of that. So in older society, right, women actually, there was men's world and there was women's world. Women prepared women. Older women would prepare younger women and teach them their responsibilities and their duties and their obligations, what their duties were to their family. So that
right, but if you say that to a feminist, just that statement right there, would you agree they would lose their shit over that statement?
I would say even a non-feminist woman, generally speaking today, especially when you get younger, into like the mid-20s, early 30s, to even suggest that there should be some kind of role or responsibilities or duties to a family, they're offended by the entire idea of it.
Right, but men are supposed to have these duties and responsibilities, right? Because you ask that same woman, what do you want in a man? And they're going to be like someone that works, someone that provides, someone that is reliable, someone that doesn't cheat, someone that listens, someone that's good spouse, whatever, right? These are all contractual buckets that they want a man to be dispersed into in different ways, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But yeah, I am amazed at how they can't turn that around and understand that themselves, that they need to also do their part on the feminine side of things.
Yeah.
Have you heard?
Because they have no idea what their part is.
Right. Have you heard of Dr. Laura? Okay, she's been around forever. I was listening to her when I was way young. And she's got a nationally syndicated radio show on XM Sirius Radio. She's on every day. And I've listened to her forever. And, she's pretty harsh in a lot of ways. And sometimes I don't agree with her. But she's got kind of her own movement where these women call up and like, well, my husband did this or my husband's doing that. And she'll just rip them because she's like, you've got to be your husband's girlfriend. You've got to understand what you need to do in order to fulfill your part of the relationship. And she talks about feminism and how everybody is just, these women are just brainwashed into thinking men are just supposed to go work, 60 hours, 80 hours a week, come home and be these amazing guys and do all this other stuff. And it is, a lot of these women are just spoiled and it's like me, 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 me. And it's great to hear a voice and a female voice because she's 71 years old, but you got to listen to her. She doesn't sound it, and she's sharp as a tack. And I mean, it is a national show. She's been on the air. She started out here, local radio, 30 plus years ago. And to hear a female, as you said, that matriarchal figurehead, right, for younger women.
Yeah.
And she's telling women, like, you're an unpaid whore. You're shacking up, right? You're just giving it away to everybody. You're kind of the gatekeeper there. You need to stop doing that. Men need to work for something. And I agree with that. I think we value more what we work for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there you go. I got a buddy that every time I end up on a construction site with him, are your daughters around? I don't want them to hear.
No. Nope, they're at mom's.
Okay.
But thank you.
Yeah. So, and it's a running joke that he always says every time he ends up hooking up with a new chick. He says, "Jesus Christ, can I take you out to dinner before you let me fuck you in the ass?"
Yeah, because there's a lot of damaged women, just like as there's a lot of damaged men that derive their self-worth through sex, through that thing. If there was one thing I could say to the ex-girlfriend, it would be like, keep filling that hole in your soul by filling that hole between your legs, because that's what she's about. It's like, how much dick can I get? How much accolades can I have? And attention can I get from other people? Because that's what makes me feel good. That's what gives me worth, not somebody that is actually there, loyal. So again, I've been through that, but I also put that aside, and I'm not going to apply that to every woman. And I feel I'm in a much better position to look for those traits and the red flags, because the red flags were all there, right? And I just didn't listen because I was damaged myself. And back to what you're saying, I think there's a lot of women out there that are just not being raised by fathers, right? I mean, what would you have me say to my children, my two daughters?
What would I have you
about
say
them being women?
The biggest thing that I think a father could say that would prepare them to be able to actually be capable of handling a man is no. I think one of the biggest things that women have not been told enough by their fathers is no. And so that then when they get with a husband, if the husband even says no once, then they're off, like throwing a temper tantrum because they didn't get their way, or all of a sudden you're a bad man, you're a bad boyfriend, you don't love them because you said no, rather than I'm not going to sit and drive myself nuts trying to keep up with your whimsical desires, knowing that half of it's fleeting.
Right. I fickled is the term I like to use.
What's that?
Fickled is the term I like to use for that behavior. It's right. Way more.
And young men have that too, unless they learn how to start telling themselves no. You have to start standing up to your own impulse. So
right, like but sorry, let me pause for a second here and go back, because you hit it. So what I should say to my daughters is to basically learn to say no, right?
Yeah.
Okay, how do they learn to say no? How do they know when to say no? How do they know what to say? I would say
one of the things is for fathers to learn to tell their daughters no.
Okay. So let me expound on that, because I agree with you. Let me get a little more the science behind that. I'm working on a kind of a concept called boxes in your basement and tools in your shed. And the boxes in your basement, I actually had this conversation with my youngest daughter. She's 8. And I'm already starting to talk to her about life, about things, and how people work. But the boxes in the basement is your foundation and what you're built on. And you have to give time and thought to what you're built on. Who are you? What do you stand for? What do you want out of life? What do you expect from other people? What do you expect from yourself? What do you expect in a relationship with a friend, a relationship with a boyfriend, and then husband? And you'll grab that individual box, you'll pull it out, unpack it, and when you open it up, you've got everything you've thought about, you've written down and understand to be for you in this box. And so when something comes along and bumps up against that, like a boundary, right? So this box is also kind of a boundary, and it allows when somebody starts to breach your boundary, you actually have something to look at and bounce off of their behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're acting in a certain way and they're treating you a certain way, right? So right now it's friends on the playground, right? It's girls on the playground with my 8-year-old. And if somebody's coming up and making fun of you, not being nice, and you can say, well, this is not acceptable behavior for me. You can disagree with me, but you can't call me names, let's say, right? So you look at your box with friends and you go, okay, they're breaching this boundary. Then you go up to your tool shed, which is a whole nother conversation, and you pull out the proper tool on how to handle that situation, right? Most of us weren't given tools in our tool shed, and I think that's the biggest thing as fathers we can do is give our kids tools, but first we got to give them to ourselves, right? If I want to go out and fix a sprinkler and dig a hole, I'm not bringing the lawnmower out. I'm bringing a shovel. And if I want to mow the lawn, I don't bring a rake out, I bring the lawnmower. And that not being defined for us individually as to how people can treat us and how they're not allowed to treat us, if we can define that, we're going to get so much further in life, and that goes for both sexes.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I do agree with that. Counseling. When I was in counseling as a younger man, I learned a lot more about that. That's actually why. That's part of the reason why I end up staying alone is because I'm capable of working through situations and conflict, and I can be in conflict, and conflict does not bother me. So when there's an issue, I'm willing to confront it head on. But most of the women I've been with don't have that ability.
Right.
The only woman I ever was with that there was even ever any conflict resolution, it ended up turning to screaming all the time when it happened. So,
yeah.
And plus, there's also a degree of thought which would say that women, generally speaking, at least the manifestation of women that a lot of us have seen, they don't want the conflict to resolve, because if the conflict is resolved, then that means that you're not in a state of stress or anxiety, which makes you harder to control.
Well, I think as with anything, there's validity to that statement depending on the individual. I think I've experienced that absolutely in some of these relationships where there always has to be drama. They're always having to keep you on your toes, so to speak, and up is down and down is up. And they need this, so you do that. Now that's not good enough. They're flip-flopping. There's a big disconnect, right, and an incongruency in what they say, what they want, what they do. And I think that's really not necessarily because they're fickle, even though that's kind of a term at the time I used because I didn't understand what was going on. But it's that there's bigger, deeper issues because they can't be happy in just a relationship that is good, clean, and healthy. Right. But then again, that goes for guys. I mean, guys are notorious for being players or douchebags or whatever. I think there's a lot of damaged, hurt people in this world. And I think if we want to fix it, we need to first take responsibility for ourselves, and we need to start standing up for ourselves, whether it's men or women. But I'm speaking mainly to men because that's who I am and my experience from. I can speak.
That's what MGTOW is, really. I mean, MGTOW it gets a rap of talking so much about women that it seems like it's just a club of He-Man woman haters. But really, the underlying message of MGTOW is you're responsible for your life. You are the only person who really cares enough to actually do the work to better your life.
Right.
But
when we say no to people, you're causing a disconnect, right? When we have boundaries with ourselves and they're thought out and well defined, and you say no, and you say no in a way that is not shaming, humiliating, and or just plain mean, but is calm, collective, thought out, and there may even be opportunity for an explanation behind that, that offers the other party the ability to begin to go, oh, I crossed this, right? And if enough people start to rise up and say, we're no longer going to accept this, which I think I understand is kind of one of the themes with MGTOW, is that, you know, collectively we're opting out, collectively we're saying no, but it seems like when you're opting out, you're just running away. You're just going, screw it, I'm done, instead of actually doing the real work to go, I'm not changing me. I'm not changing what I want. You guys need to change. And how that change is going to happen is by me saying no and us standing up for ourselves and not putting up with this bullshit anymore.
Well, I think they're probably that's one of the problems in MGTOW is that there isn't really a complete consensus. But the idea of I'm not going to change is not so much. MGTOW actually, I think, in a lot of ways, promotes change of self. I think most of us, what we find is through cutting off relations with the other sex, or at least putting them at an arm's length, that then we see that we're better able to more rapidly focus on self-development, because you're not distracted by trying to satisfy an unsatisfiable creature. You're focused on my focus is has been self-development in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Taking better care of myself, getting better skills with working with money and working with people.
Right, and how does that feel?
What's that?
How does that feel today, right now, than 3 years ago or whatever the time frame?
It's great. That's why, like, so.
Now imagine if you did that on the relationship, right? You continue on that path and you get to a point where you're seeing the world not from underwater, but well above water. And yeah, the pool of women in our case is a lot smaller to choose from, but it's a lot more refreshing to know that when you choose from that pool, it's going to be a much higher caliber. You've got somebody commented, there are no more viable male players left in the game. This is misanthropic. Just a bunch of fools that have not realized the game has been turned upside down. Hell hath no fury like a thought scorned. Oh, okay, new term.
Thought that hoe over there.
Oh, right. Yes, I did hear that. So, hell hath no fury like a thought scorned. Yeah. Right, but I say don't even play that game. Don't even be in the game with these people. I'm not going to argue with an idiot.
Well, that's what MGTOW is. MGTOW is saying the game is rigged, so don't play.
Well, see, I say, okay, the game may be rigged with a lot of people, but I choose to associate with those that are not in that game, right? So if I hire team members for my company and I need a certain caliber, I have an actual job description. I met with a team last week and we delved into the job description because I need to hire a sales associate. What does that look like? What is expected from them? What are the core values of my company? And then we created questions around that for the interview process. So I can gauge where they're at. And then we created these questions that are designed to pull out the values of the other person. And like I said, so I can then gauge whether they match up to our criteria or not. The majority of people that I interview are, nuh-uh. Lucky if half of them even show up for the interview, right? And when they show up, you're lucky if they can, form a coherent sentence sometimes. And then those that can, you're searching to see how much bullshit is there or not, okay? And then when you get past all that, right, my whole point is you're narrowing down the field. Dave Ramsey, I don't know if anybody knows him, but he's got a course in EntreLeadership and money. He's phenomenal. Helped me years ago. But he says for his company, I think he employs 400 or 500 people. He goes, it's harder to get into my company than it is to get into Harvard. Our acceptance rate is less because we're so meticulous about, who we hire. Well, I think that needs to apply to our friends, our family even. Or especially our family, the argument can be made. And then obviously for the future mothers or fathers of our children, the spouses, right? that needs
Oh, for
to be
sure.
applied to that. Nobody's having that conversation and what that means and what that looks like. When I go on and have looked, like I said briefly at MGTOW, you see a bunch of people hating women. Oh, look at this bitch over here. Look at that. I mean, they're using these
It
negative
runs a lot
words
deeper
that
than
I would
that.
never
You know,
call
a
my
lot of the things
girls.
you're saying are lining right up with what MGTOW's saying. We, in general, though, the general consensus among MGTOW circles is that, put it like this. They call it Nawalt. Not all women are like that, or unicorns. I personally do believe that there are a few. I don't like the word good women who are put together, who have self awareness, and are like actually,
Yeah, that'll be my daughter because I'm doing that, training that now.
that have some substance, right? The problem is that it's in such short supply that you don't even know where to begin to try to find it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like looking for a needle in a needle stack, and not I said a needle in a needle stack, not a needle in a haystack. It's
Right.
like sifting through a whole
Right.
bunch
No,
of,
I
it's
get
like
the
sifting through a
analogy.
whole bunch
Yeah.
of needles, saying which one.
Right.
You know,
You're looking for the sharp needle in a stack of dull needles.
right? And it's so it's
So then I've chosen, you just made me think of something. So I've chosen to not date. Well, I shouldn't say not date, but I took a year off after the last episode. I'm like, I'm done for now. I'm going to work on me, work on my company, be a father, work on that, get myself together so I can level up. But also at the same time, I'm not interested in going out there and just dating constantly anybody or anything to just see. You've got to. My bar is raised so high, most women will just walk under it. But if somebody bumps up against that bar, I will take a look and ask that person out, and assuming they accept, then we'll see what happens from there. But I am not in a hurry to find someone, if that makes sense. So does that make me MGTOW in a way? Or is it I have to be truly MGTOW, I've got to just say, screw it all, I'm going to go live in a shack in the woods?
No, well, that's the whole thing. MGTOW doesn't require anything of you. MGTOW is a loose fitting garment that you choose to put on whatever way fits you yourself. That's why I said your own way.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
The problem, I do see problems with it, and it being so individualistic, because it doesn't allow for there to be a group consensus among men. And basically, culture is led by men. The values of a society are led by men, and basically, I mean,
well, I think society a lot is led by women in certain ways. Women are the biggest consumers of products. Women have the ear of a lot of guys, and it's more complicated in a sense than I think we think.
But those are men who are letting women run that are men who are not standing up to the women. Men are not standing up for.
Well, I'm thinking in a way. I'm talking in a context where, hey, we want to buy a house, honey. What do we want? I'm involving the other party. I don't go into my business and my office and just start dictating. That's not worked. I've screwed up, and I've learned from my mistakes as a boyfriend, a husband, a leader, a father, right? We could sit here and have 5 shows on just where I've gone wrong on that. But I can't walk in and just start dictating to everybody. I have to get people involved. I wouldn't want anybody to walk in and start dictating to me. I wouldn't want my wife running me over. So
I would suggest reading or listening to the book "The Way of Men" by Jack Donovan.
Okay.
It's a book. It talks about more tribal societies, but basically how men's values and virtues really deal in regard to what's beneficial to other men, and that those men end up being the spearhead of their tribe, and that the women, basically, if the women want to provision of and protection of those men, then they have to basically kind of bring something of value to the table. The other part of that,
well, right, I think people have to bring value. And when
The
you're
function
not
of
bringing
the function of
value,
women within a tribe is to continue the tribe.
I think that's one of the things. I love you. You've seen 300, right?
I haven't seen 300. No, actually I should. I keep hearing about it.
Oh my gosh, that is a phenomenal movie just on the pure blood and guts alone. But one of my favorite scenes is in the opening scene because you've got the main character, forgetting his name, but you've got the king and the queen basically, okay, and they've got a visitor coming in, and he's telling them their demands and what have you, and he's pissing off this guy, and this guy is also talking negative about his wife, the queen, and he's finally had enough, and so there's this big pit that's just a bottomless pit, basically. No boundaries around it, just wide open on the floor there. And they're walking, and you can see he's building up, and he's having enough. And he looks to his wife, or the queen, and she nods, and he just turns around, and I think that's where he said, "This is Sparta," or whatever, and he kicks him into the pit. It's kind of a famous scene. But I love the quiet strength and the interplay between the two, and that goes on throughout the movie as well, as kind of a sub story. But I think that's how I see a relationship, right? The men may actually carry out the act, but you're using the temperament and calmness and different point of view of a female that adds value, right? Because you're talking about adding value and what they bring to the table. Now, if there's just some chick that's crazy and can't handle anything and can't have a thought, and they're just losing their mind, and they need a fainting couch and pearls to clutch as they faint. Yeah, that doesn't bring anything to the relationship. Do kids bring anything to a relationship? Did you bring anything to the relationship of your parents?
Kids aren't. From my perspective, kids aren't supposed to. Parents are supposed to give to the children. Parents are supposed to pour into children so that as the children grow up, then they actually are capable of pouring back.
Well, right. And that's kind of my point, because part of it is sometimes we pour into others so they can pour back, but you've got to pour into the right person, right? And I think kids, at least for me, bring tremendous value, have taught me more than I can ever imagine from having kids. The patience, the understanding, the looking at the world through fresh eyes, just the innocence. It's brought me back. It's centered in a way to kind of a better place as well. So my main point is there's value in everything. We only need to look and see it and understand it. But right, if my kid was say born a sociopath, and doesn't matter how good of a father I am, there's going to be, just like he's trying to kill small animals and stuff like that, psychopath, let's say. Yeah, that's going to just cause, constant angst. So if I'm dating someone who's a narcissist or just has, severe issues, I mean, this person, I thought she was a math book. She had more problems than one. And when you're always trying to solve those things and your time is spent geared towards all that, yeah, it's taken away. So I think the real conversation is we all agree this stuff isn't good, and this is a negative person to be with. So how do we get with the right person? What does that look like? Where's that being modeled for us? I don't think any of this is being modeled, because if it bleeds, it leads. And so I think that's the same with MGTOW is, there's so many people. I've read some of the comments, and they're just ripping on women, and they're just, yeah, this and that, and they suck. And I know you said it's like a coat. I forget your analogy, but, or something that everybody could wear a little differently. But I think there's a large consensus out there for guys to just fall into this trap and label it something without having a lot of thought. Talking to someone like you, there's different.
The consensus, and it's been arrived at through all the thought that has been done. MGTOW is not just, so the big part too is MGTOW is not just about women and relationships. Although one of the things is, like, we keep coming back to finding the right one, finding the right kind of person to be with. Whereas MGTOW way of seeing things would encourage you that, like, why do you have to be with somebody so badly that you're so trying to find the right kind of person? What is so wrong with being alone. And like I know
Right.
that you said that we were here to procreate and all that, and that's I believe there's truth in that. I believe that's like pretty much true. But when you're in a society that has turned people's nature upside down, and to where people are living completely in opposition to what their nature is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Right. We're
then
trying to escape who we are.
well, and so what are we gonna do? Sit and as the man feed ourselves to a wood chipper, just in the name of trying to do, yeah, no, not that. Okay, so that's what we would tend to say then is like, why do you need to be with somebody else so badly?
Right.
Why? And
Well, why does
we
a
know
woman
we
need to be with a man so badly? It's all insecurities. It's like you said, being alone scares the hell out of us. I had a friend who is in the business of helping other people, and in talking to her, she confided to me. She goes, the other night I was so afraid of being alone. Not afraid in the sense of someone's going to hurt her, but just like jonesing for to be around somebody because the silence of being by themselves is apparently painful, that she had to do everything in her power to just not call somebody to come over or hang out. And I think that speaks volumes for that individual, but I think there's a lot of us that don't know how to be together, or excuse me, be alone and be by ourselves, be together with ourselves, if you will. We don't enjoy our own company. We're always numbing out by TV, drinking, drugs, social interactions. And I love being out with people. And I also I could sit in a forest and stare at a tree all day, just to have that time alone.
yeah.
But I think that is true that most people, or definitely a lot of people, don't know how to be alone. And you can't be in a relationship, in a healthy one, in my opinion, until you're good with being alone, until you're good with being with yourself, until you're happy with yourself, until your thoughts don't haunt you. So you need to interrupt that with haunting somebody else.
So MGTOW spends a lot of time trying to convince younger men. I always say trying to convince, making the case that you've got the rest of your life. You've got the rest of your life to potentially get your life screwed up with a woman, but you're not gonna get your early 20s back.
Right.
And so and that kind of energy and drive that you have in your early 20s is going to fade. It would be better used towards things that are actually likely to pay off, because relationships with women are not likely to pay off. Really, not generally speaking. I mean, they may, to some degree, but it's not worth putting all your eggs in that basket. The other piece, okay, so MGTOW, a lot of it does boil down to um, critiquing of the state. And so
We're talking
MGTOW is
government,
beyond just
politics.
relationships with women. A lot of it deals with the way that our state basically robs men in order to keep taking care of women. So we call it Big Daddy government.
Mm-hmm.
And that so much of our economy is false. That we have education systems that don't really vastly they don't prepare young people for the adult world. And so really
I agree.
It's a waste of taxpayer money, and it's predominantly men who are paying these taxes so that women can have a job. And what is it that the women do in these jobs? And not just women, but usually now anymore it's mostly women in education.
Yeah.
They go and they raise other people's kids while sending their kids off to be raised by somebody else, and that men are being exploited in order to pay for this. And this is just one instance. Another instance would be Section 8 housing, where men are being exploited through the state to pay to keep her and her children housed while she's also receiving child support or alimony potentially, maybe letting another man sleep there,
Mm-hmm.
who has his own money and all of this. And so,
Right, but see, that all goes back to the character of the individual, and that's what's gotten us screwed up in the first place. So a lot of what you said, I understand, and I think a lot of what you said is screwed up when it happens. Right, I've chosen to not introduce my kids to that person, whoever that may be in the future. Not that we wouldn't run into each other at Starbucks or something, but really not to introduce. This is my girlfriend, and we're going to smooch, let alone spending the night, let alone moving in, let alone getting married until my kids are up and out, because they've been through enough and they need that stability. I mean, it's hard enough and they got to go back and forth between two households. And on the other side, I've actually had that conversation with the ex-wife. Like, really, I think this is what we should do. We're in agreement, and hopefully that holds. But I have no plans to have that happen, because I don't want that. I thought in the beginning, like, that's what should just naturally happen, and it would be best for the kids, because people make the argument, oh, kids need to see what a loving relationship is like and blah, blah, blah. But really, if you look at the stats, 70% of the second marriages don't work out, and a big portion of that is because they have kids, and their kids in the same household, and there's who's going to raise them and whose rules and values. And so I sidestep all that mess, committed to being a father first, and then a relationship side of things afterwards. But all this goes to a core value system, and who we are, and everything comes back to that. If you step up and you're a good person, and you're not bringing somebody else into the picture, even if you have to pay for your kids, and she goes and she's sleeping with somebody else and brings them in, and men are coming in and out of the picture, that really hurts me to even think about that, because I'm thinking it from the child's point of view of watching these guys come in and out, and watching another relationship fail and another relationship fail. So again, I agree with you on a lot of these things, but you can't also, obviously, and I don't think you would agree or think that you could legislate that type of behavior, or do you?
Well, no. This is what we're saying. This is what I'm saying. The way that our legal structure is set up now, it encourages women not to accept responsibility or accountability for their actions. We subsidize their
So I'm sorry, how's that? Like, how does it encourage them to not take responsibility for their actions?
Because there's no risk involved for them. They don't lose anything by getting knocked up by a thug who ends up getting carted off to prison.
Right, but you can't legislate that morality. So, I mean, you can't legislate that. So if somebody's married, right, they have a kid, they get divorced. The kid's with mom 50% of the time, let's say, right, just keep it equal. And then you're saying this female now gets knocked up by some bad dude, not a good dude, and they're together, he's living in the house, but then something happens, he gets carted off to jail, right? Now there's two kids, two different dads in this situation, and you're saying that the first guy has to pay still for child support, potentially even alimony, for her to take care of somebody else's kid?
That what we as a society then do is turn around and reward that by giving her Section 8 housing, by giving her food stamps, by giving her welfare, by giving her WIC, by also having laws in place that say while she's receiving all of that, she could also be getting child support. And then when the one guy might have got sent off to prison, but then when he comes out, he can go to prison. And not only that, on top of all that, she could then be letting another man even in Section 8 housing. Yeah. You have Section 8 housing, as far as I'm concerned, if you're in Section 8 housing, you shouldn't even be allowed to bring a man in that.
Right.
Period. Not even like to live there.
Well, right. And I say that from a moral standpoint. And that's the problem, right? Separation of church and state, separation of state and morality, even though they want to legislate that, that's a slippery slope. But I agree, at least what I just heard with, that's not a good thing.
Right. Because
that's a much bigger discussion. Yeah, that's a much bigger discussion. It's like welfare right? In general, that's a big discussion. Forget kids even. It's like if you're on welfare and you're just sitting there collecting, and not doing anything, that doesn't do you any good. That doesn't do society any good.
Right.
But that's a whole nother discussion. So I would probably, to kind of sum this part up, agree that more, or at least definitely a bigger discussion should happen around that.
There's a lot of areas. Then you go into the education system, where all that is again taking tax money, which is predominantly produced by men, and lending it out to students to students, and anymore it's mostly women going into college, and then they get what, like you've heard Peterson talk about, how women in their 30s in law firms, all of a
Right.
sudden they just drop out of the workforce. So why
Right.
are we investing into people who half the time don't pay their student loans back and even use their education for anything because they
Yeah, but I
for
think there's
whatever
also a
reason.
human component that needs to be brought into that equation, which is women are the only people that can bear children. So the next generation, our kids and everything, they're brought into this world through women. So if you're in something and that woman gets educated to a certain point in this firm and then drops out to go have kids and you know, live that life, let's say, I don't think that's necessarily a waste of time. I don't think that's any waste. I think that individual is better for it.
It's not about her. It's not about whether her having children or any of that is a waste of time. It's that making the taxpayer, making me, who has no say in her choices, making me as a taxpayer have to subsidize that
How are you
is
subsidizing that?
through my taxes.
I'm sorry, how?
Because I mean, half of how the education system, college education system, is being paid for is through tax government loans.
Okay, so I think I understand with the different examples you've brought up what you're saying. So yeah, that's a secondary effect. I don't think it's set up that way though, right? Meaning I don't think it's set up with that in mind. I think that's a secondary benefit in certain ways to people, all different types of people, men and women. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with big government at all. I'm for, you know, downsize DC. I'm for, you know, less government, more individual responsibility. And again, that's an argument that needs to be had in its own context. I can
But
see
this
the
is
relation though.
where we would say then that men have dropped the ball, because men in their quest and desire to try to do good for women have set up all of these systems that exploit men for the sake of women. But then it's turned out to become is that women have married the government and the man is the third party in the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's instances of that, and whether it's a great amount of instances or not, but I think men are doing the same thing. I think government's sole purpose as this self-perpetuating machine is to get as many people, men or women, children, you name it, your damn dog, hooked, so you're just become a battery for them. And the battery
Right.
is, instead of electrical current, is currency. And so you
Right.
can just continue to supply them, right? In all ways, right? So if you look at loans, men and women taking out tons of school loans and not paid it back.
Right, yeah.
Maybe there's some stats that say women default more than men or what have you. I don't know. I have not looked into that, and maybe that's true, and maybe that lends itself more to what you're saying, that we then end up subsidizing that. But we're subsidizing this crap, period. And I don't think any of that's a good idea. And I think that that argument in that arena is, you know, you can go and pick any point. You can go and look at anything, and you can pick out a flaw. You can pick out a problem, and you can try to build your case by picking this and picking that and picking that. And I think that's small thinking. I think you've got to become laser focused onto what the real issue is. And as I just look at MGTOW as a whole, and I see the people that are involved in that and hearing some of this stuff, it seems like, I don't know, because, well, I'm mixed, because there's nothing wrong with it. You're not hurting anybody. I mean, maybe there's a case to be made that you're hurting society in certain aspects of it. But at least on the surface level, if you choose not to have kids, and you choose not to date at whatever level, right? Date or only sleep with, or, abscond from women altogether, celibacy, whatever it is, you're not hurting any other individual. So I can appreciate that. But I think, like you said, they're trying to kind of talk to younger guys. And I think the younger guys need to be talked to in a way that builds character, in a way that builds self-reliance and those boundaries and these boxes I've talked about within yourself, so that we can raise the next generation of great children, that are, hold on. Hold on 1 second. Okay, I got a big, like 110-pound lab, and he was walking over here by the camera and the wires for a second, and I didn't want him to pull this thing down. All right, sorry. So, I just think there's a disconnect. I can see some points, I can see some ideas, but I think that's gotten carried too far. I think that's what I'm saying.
So
it's like feminism. This is meninism.
I would say that it's not far enough.
Well, of course.
It'll probably never become it'll never probably become mainstream, but all it has to do is become big enough to enter the collective consciousness of people.
Right.
That it has gotten bad enough that there is a large group of men who are doing well in life, but who will not have anything to do with. Let me say have anything to do with, but are not all that interested in the women of today for whatever reason, and then they can figure out from there on their own. It's a conversation that's really not being had in the mainstream. All you hear is there's not eligible men. We don't hear about how many eligible men there are out there who are choosing to stay off the radar because.
Well, I think that's true, and I think there's also a bunch of eligible men that you're just not hearing about because they're busy living their lives, and I think you don't hear about how many uneligible women there are, and by uneligible, sure. I mean like not healthy. It just what you seem to hear in society is men, very few, right? A hard man is good to find. A good man is hard to find. And then you got on the other side, women just like all men are this and all men are that and everything. And I think there's a lot of bad women too. I think it's probably equal. I think equally screwed up. It's an inverse.
I think in MGTOW we try not to so much focus on good and bad, though. We really make it more about a phenomenon of nature, because it's really more of a critique of female nature than it is about a good or bad. Yeah, and
but a female nature raised healthy.
For you as a man.
I think a female nature raised healthy is very productive and has a lot to give to society, just as a male raised healthy has a lot to give. I just see it as a kind of a universal truth. If you want to go back to natures, I think there's great power in women that are healthy. And I think it's a different but equal power than men have. I really, truly believe that.
Well, it's the power to give life, but
no, I'm not even saying that.
Hold women accountable for their womb.
I'm not thinking of children. Obviously, that is its own thing. I'm talking about the human being. Forget pregnancy. I'm talking about a female. The one I have in my head that I picture my daughter embodying as an adult woman. That picture I have in my head of what that looks like, who she is, not what she likes, not what music she likes or what food or what clothes she likes, right? It's not like trying to nail down every specific thing, but it's how she acts in this world. How does she act that is going to either make this place a better place? And is she going to act in a way that has boundaries? Yes. And says no? Yes. I mean, these are at least all things I hope for, right? And does not put up with men's bullshit. Is not spread her legs for every guy that comes around, because she's got too much self-dignity or dignity and self-worth to be doing that. And also is fun. And I think when you get a grown adult that's healthy, they offer things from a different perspective. If you've got 10 guys in a room, let's just say for sake of argument, they're all healthy. Nobody's, narcissist or egotistical, and they're all pretty healthy. They're going to offer 10 different points of view on something. And those points of view, let's say half of them are valid in this particular instance where they're offering this forward, right? So 5 of those guys have added value to whatever thing we're trying to solve, let's say, right? Well, if you had 10 women in a room and they offer value in their own way to something they're trying to solve, there you go. You get men and women together in the same room that can offer different perspectives. I think that's great. I don't see it as, I don't know.
Well, that's what we've done, and we're living in the results of that.
What do you mean?
Like the world we're living in right now, that's what we've done. We've brought women into the fold of the problem.
Well, I said healthy. That's a huge caveat. Healthy anybody, right? I don't go get 10 men and half of them I got on the corner who are hooked on drugs or have mental illnesses and bring them in and expect to have a coherent discussion about our project management system. But I can bring 5 healthy guys and 5 healthy women in and have a discussion about our project management system. The result of where we live today, I agree, the outcome is not good. We're living in times that are the Kardashians and that type of thinking where, you're famous and you just watch these girls on camera. I mean, I've flipped through and I've landed on it, and I can't take more than 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm curious just to be like, what is all the excitement about? Or the Real Hollywood or the Real Housewives of Orange County. I had a friend that was a producer on that show. And he's like, oh, yeah, they'd fight and do all this stuff and everything. And then the camera would cut and they'd be having drinks and doing whatever. A lot of it's scripted. But the women and that buy into this stuff, that watch that, I don't think that's healthy. I think there's a lot of this media has really gone to distort and skew society today. And I'm not blaming them per se. And I'm not even saying there's necessarily a conspiracy, but I think probably that case could be made in certain ways for certain things.
Yeah. I mean, MGTOW lines right up with conspiracy theory pretty nicely. I mean, and I do. So you don't think there's conspiracy? I do. 100%. And I'm not.
Well, right. I'm not well rehearsed on that, but I have my own ideas. I don't let my girls watch Disney. I started letting them watch Disney. And then I'm like, okay, every father on the Disney Channel in any show is an idiot. Every father is portrayed as a Homer Simpson, some bumbling buffoon that the kids are actually disrespectful to even. Not only is the wife disrespectful, but the kids are disrespectful. And then I Googled that because I'm like, well, I wonder if I'm the only one. And no, there's a lot of people saying the same thing. And this is supposed to be Disney, right? Who is very, benign in certain ways, but they're not. And I think there's a concerted effort because the women are at home watching this with the kids and going, yeah, that's right. And I think there's a lot of women at home watching this going, that's horrible, and turn it off.
I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Well, but I think there's stuff in media. So I'm talking about even with a kids show, right? All the way up to, other more mainstream shows where men tend to be kind of the idiots, and women are portrayed a certain way and men are portrayed a certain way, and then you there's that underlying liberalism, left wing thinking that permeates the media. I think I could say that.
There's the whole concept of dating is a new thing anyway. Our grandparents and great grandparents, they didn't date, they courted, which meant that they showed up to each other's house and got to know each other, and if they liked each other, then they would sleep with each other and have children and a family. But
right,
it's like you didn't sleep with anybody until you were married.
Yeah, you had to ask for the father's permission, right?
Is a lie. It's not real.
I'm sorry, say that last part. I interrupted.
This whole thing that we're now calling dating is not
No.
It's not really.
No,
It's
I
not
got
really
on the apps for a while. This is a couple years ago. I got on the dating apps, and it was kind of disgusting. I did it because actually I was a really shy guy when it came to women and asking them out. Like my whole life, I've never really done that. So I've gotten whatever the hell's come along. But I'm like, okay, I need to force myself to do this. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get on the dating app because that's what you do. And as I get on this, it's like a meat market. It literally is kind of disgusting that I mean, it's, it's like porn. You're just next, next, next. And you're looking at this stuff. And, just about all of them were, well, all of them, just about all of them on there, I had no interest in. And the ones I kind of did when we did go out on dates, I mean, within a 3-week period, no joke, probably went out on 14 dates. And what I mean by date is even just meeting for coffee. Because first I'm like, okay, let's go on a date. And then I go on a date. I'm like, oh my God, I've locked myself in. So now I'm researching how all this works. Oh, you just go meet for coffee or talk on the phone more first. And so I would just start getting in the point of meeting for lunch or going for coffee to meet and just see if there's anything there, right? Because you can't always tell through the phone and definitely can't tell through a text. And, after a while, I shut everything down because I'm like, this is disgusting. This is really not how I think I'm going to meet anybody of quality, because anybody of quality is not going to be on these sites. And if I'm trying to be of quality, I'm not going to be on these sites either. I'm going to go out into the real world, be doing stuff, working on stuff. I'll meet somebody that way when the time is right. Have you been on the apps?
I briefly checked them out, but I wasn't even really that whole thing. The whole technological age is strange to me. I only got a smartphone like a year or two ago. I was not trying to move with the times. I was a much bigger fan of how things were. uh, Even like music wise, I still wanted to carry my CDs and all that, and just buy an album instead of
Yeah.
streaming online. So no, not really. All the women I've dated, I don't think I've dated anybody from meeting them online. Everybody I've ever been involved with, I met in real life.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way.
School together or work together or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, right, like Tinder and everything is a lot of these people are just expecting hookups. And I think that goes to what MGTOW's saying about these women, or your buddy at the construction site. These women are they're expecting to just jump into bed. And like, it almost sounds like what he's saying is, have sex with me to prove to me that you like me, instead of allowing me to prove to you I like you in other ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, there's this new way of seeing it now, and it's in a lot of dating circles or like dating coaches. The way that they teach it is that you have to, in order to be in a relationship, you have to sleep with the person first.
Right.
And it's actually true. It's like, what really is?
Well, are these coaches for guys or for girls?
No, this is for guys.
Okay.
It's what works.
The pickup artist
now, which is that you don't. In order to engage a woman's emotionally, you have to get in bed with her.
Right, but that's using them, right? Because there's chemicals that are released in the act of sex that, can pair bond people together, and women, I guess, are more susceptible to those chemicals than men. So are you saying they're literally understanding that concept and playing on that?
I don't know if they're understanding that, but what they're basically saying though is in order to even get her attention enough to get to know her and to get her emotionally engaged in any kind of way, you have to sleep with her first. Otherwise, she loses interest, and it's true.
Right, but
if you try to slow down and just go out to eat with a girl anymore, or like even just coffee, and try to just talk to them and figure out who is this person. If you don't immediately start making moves on them, they register it as you're a coward. You're afraid to make a move on them. When it's more like, maybe I'm just trying to figure out how fucking crazy you are.
Right. Yeah, I think that's pretty sad. But okay.
But if you don't, you might actually kind of like the girl, but if you don't immediately make a move, she loses interest so quickly.
So why do you think she loses
Because of
interest?
that your only option is to jump in bed with somebody immediately. It's like sleep with them and then get to know them.
So who says that about women? Like where is that? Like where's this great book of women? And this is chapter 3 in there that most women are like
I
this
mean, you could
nowadays.
look up like Corey Wayne. He talks about that.
Well, is he
Jason
is he
Cassell talks about
citing
that.
statistics, or he's just saying that's what he thinks?
I don't know if he's citing statistics.
Okay. Well, I'll check him out.
He's going. I mean, yeah, these are guys that coach, thousands of guys in their relationships with women in their businesses and all that kind of thing. So they're just men's coaches, and that's what works now. That's what works now. And if you're not, it's kind of like a point of frustration for some of us because. Frankly, I don't want to just sleep with somebody I don't even know.
Right.
I really don't. To me, there's nothing appealing. It's disgusting to me.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you don't even
Unless
get to
you're
know
drunk.
somebody until you slept with them. Like that's like the way it is now. Because society has become so sexualized and quote liberated. The only way to actually get to know somebody is to jump in bed with them and then get to know them. It's ass backwards. Everything is upside down. But if you want to play that game at all, you have to play by the new.
Yeah, I
new
think
rules
though
you're gonna be left
women
behind.
are cheapening themselves because I'm going to turn that around. A lot of them think that's what men want,
Yeah, well,
and in order to show their
a lot
worth,
of
because they
men do
cannot
want
say
that.
no, is they're ready to go.
Right, a lot of men do want that, but they're typically
Right.
not the kind of men that they're looking for.
Right, but see, they're screwed up individuals because they don't have a basic. That's the whole point of the Wholehearted Man and this channel is to start to bring about the discussion of what healthy looks like. And instead of seeing everything that's wrong with everything, we can sit here all day and point this out. Do you agree? We can sit and see all the problems with everything. I don't think there's any shortage of that. My mission is to become that beacon of light, that voice in the darkness, if you will, that says, okay, yeah, all this stuff might be true, but now what? What are we going to do? For those of you that are interested in bettering your life, in being a better person, of leveling up, of gaining character, gaining control over yourself, let's start showing those examples, and let's start being an example to others, children, spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends, it doesn't matter, of someone that is healthy and what that looks like and how is that maintained, and start changing the world that way, because we can complain, but what's the solution? So to MGTOW, apparently the solution is to opt out in one form or another. That's where I disagree, and we go our separate paths, even though I understand your guys' kind of premise, and I think there's a lot of valid points there, and I appreciate you coming on and explaining more to me. It's given me a better understanding, but I think there comes a point where I draw the line and we diverge into two different paths, because I'm just going in a different direction that is up for actually changing at the very thing you guys are complaining about.
Yeah, yes. Well, there's also men's rights activists, and they're at work trying to change the legal system. I guess what you could say about MGTOW is MGTOW's more immediate. MRAs are engaged in a battle with the government and trying to change that, whereas MGTOW's immediate.
Okay,
MGTOW,
sorry. What's
you say
MRAs?
no. What's that?
What's MRAs? I'm learning here.
Yeah, MRAs, men's rights activists.
Oh yeah. Okay.
When a man says no, like, it's not like I don't have options with women.
Mm-hmm.
I've had enough women express interest in the last year,
Mm-hmm.
but none of them really were bringing anything to the table
Mm-hmm.
more than their.
Well, and I think you're
vagina.
better off. Totally would agree. You're probably assuming your thought is this, that you're better off for having not gone that direction. I've
Yeah,
had
yeah, for
opportunities
sure.
too. I'm
I was
much
fully
better off
justified.
for not going that direction.
Sorry.
I was saying I've had opportunities as well, and I'm much better off for not jumping back in. But I would have jumped back in, rewind 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and before. Type of person I was would have jumped into those bad situations, those bad relationships, because I needed to feel loved. I needed to be with someone, right? I wasn't good being alone with myself. As I worked on myself and figured that out, I'm very good. And as a result of that, I'm very confident in myself, very powerful in certain ways. And that probably on its face value will attract a better caliber of woman eventually. And sorry, can you hear my dog snoring?
Nah.
Okay, I got a microphone that's good close up, but that guy, like I say, he's a big dog and he just snores. He's great, but man, he's loud. I can hear him through my headphones. Okay, sorry. But back to I think I'm going in a different direction that is more about solving it. You're talking about, you said this is MGTOW is more immediate, right? So are you saying, well, let me
It's more immediate in producing results in your own personal life.
Okay. I think that's actually fair.
Not trying to change and improve the world. MGTOW are about trying to change and improve our own lives.
Okay, I can see that. I can also see where that gets taken to an extreme because people are bad mouthing women. People are being very derogatory towards women, and I don't like that part. But as you said, it's not one shoe fits all. But I can see what you're saying as a general, immediate something to do, or at least an idea to get behind to kind of stop. Like, it's okay to not be with a woman. It sounds like is the general premise of MGTOW right off the bat. Is that fair to say? Like, you have other men standing up and saying, you don't have to just sleep with a woman immediately. You don't have to just put up with the crap.
Not only that it's okay to not be with a woman, but it might even be better to be alone.
Yeah, well, we'll diverge roads at that point because I think there's great benefits to being with somebody. That would be like saying, "Oh, well, I don't think we should have friends." There's no point in having relationships with people.
Say not have friends. I mean, I have friends, and I'm friends with females. But,
yeah.
Then again, it could also be said that if these women weren't sexually interested in me, maybe they wouldn't be my friends anyway.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. They could be, it could be one way or another. All right. Well, what do you think? Was this a good, good session?
It's a good place to leave off. I think we've covered quite a lot here.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate you, explaining things to me, especially the acronyms that I seem to be lacking with MRAs and stuff like that. But I think I have a better understanding of you guys, and I think in its more raw form, MGTOW is not necessarily as negative as I thought it was, even though I think there's those components of it, but not those people don't represent everybody.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of. It's not like a religion where we all believe the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us have very differing. Like there's certain guys within the whatever you want to call it group. It's not a group, but that are strongly advocate the idea of pumping and dumping, which short-term relationships,
right.
hookups, and then it goes to the other extreme of guys who say that's destructive to yourself and to others,
mm-hmm.
and B that's actually just contributing to the problem,
right?
That we're so sick of anyway. So
yeah, I mean, look, what two consenting adults do, I get it in one respect, but right, I think you cheapen yourself.
Yeah,
especially if that's your MO. It's not like something just happened. If it's like you're on the hunt, like that is your MO and that's what you're doing, and it's like I'm gonna pump, I'm gonna dump, and I'm out of here. That's yeah, to live that way is going to be is going to be a detriment to, I think, your actual mental health. Even at some point, it can become
Well,
even an
it has
addiction.
consequences, seen or unseen, not just for the person you're doing it to, but it affects yourself too. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm
it's
saying. If you even look at yourself selfishly first, it's going to have negative effects on you. The other person is responsible for themselves, and them doing it's going to have the same consequences. You don't even have to necessarily look at you take. I mean, but I guess there's ways where you could be more predatory, especially as a male, and these pickup artists, and you're going out there and playing on women's fears and this and that just to get them into bed. Really? That's all you got? That's the mental capacity that you learn some questions and some tricks to be a, someone that kind of scams women into bed? That was the challenge. That's like going to a strip club. I actually have never really liked strip clubs. Yes, I've been to strip clubs, went with my bros when I was young, and wow, I saw boobies on stage, when I was 20. Okay, cool. But I really can't stand
a
it.
sleazy place to hang out.
Yeah, it's like I just could never get into it because it's like, I'm going to give you $1 to show me your tits. Like, what's the point of that? Well, you're somebody's daughter, you're somebody's sister, probably somebody's mother, and this is it's not for me anyways. So, all right, Fester, my man, thank you.
All right, John.
I appreciate it.
Day.
Maybe we'll do this again.
All right.
I'll come up with some stuff, and we'll go from there.
All right, take care.
All right, my friend. Talk to you later. Bye.